Welcome to the Alchemist Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people, unless you're me.
I'm Emily.
And I'm KristaLyn. And for anybody who's watching the video on YouTube right now, if you see me being nudged, it's not spiritual, it's a corgi. He keeps prodding at me to get pets. And me, I'm just like, yeah, let me pet you because you're adorable. So I apologize to anybody watching the video if you see me like going back and forth. It's just him. It's Jack.
Such a funny disclaimer to have to give. It's not the spirits, it's the dog.
It's the dog. And it's my heart. I can't take it. Oh, but guess what? We are in the final days. The final day, actually, when this airs, I guess, is like going to be the 30th.
2 days.
Yeah, the final 2 days of 2021. And
yes.
I've already been seeing TikToks of people who are like, 2020 is going to be a great year. 2021 has got to be better, right? Now that at 2022, they're just like, 22 is a year. It's a year, right? Like years are just years. But honestly,
365 days, something's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure things will occur. I actually do have more optimism for this year. Having changes, but also having positive changes and having changes that we can actually move with rather than be subject to, if that makes sense. There's a lot of things that have been decisions made on a collective level that we have to get on board with or resist in whatever capacity they've come across and whatever way we've been felt drawn. But I think this year we finally get our autonomy back a little bit, which is just really funny. Because I say that intuitively, but then thinking about the astrology where we have this separating but still present aspect between Saturn and Uranus just hanging around for the year of helping us decide how we're going to change our structures in our personal lives, but then also in culture. So it does make sense.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that too. On just a purely numerological level, 2022 is a cooler year. If we're just looking at the numbers alone, the amount of like amplified magic energy that is in that number is really, really fantastic and cool. So just on that alone, without even any like tuning into the energy beyond that, it's already better energy, period. Even than 2020. Like 2020 was a fine year numerologically, but this one is far superior.
Yeah, and it's funny in numerology, the only traditional master number, because I have studied a little bit in numerology and read a few books, the only real true traditional master number is 22. And it's usually like 22-4 because you could reduce it to 4, but 22 gets that acknowledgement. And I really, it's always been my favorite number for
really.
Oh yeah, always, my whole life. And my parents, and my dad was born on the 22nd, and 22 always ends up being a year that's like my 22nd year was important. Dads and moms were both important, so it's been a recurring number. Like my mom in basketball when she was in high school, her number was 22, and all of these synchronistic things. My dad's life number in numerology is 22.
Whoa.
Yeah, I've always been a little jealous of that one. Mine's 5. Which is still pretty good. I like
3.
So. Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I think I'm a 3. Now I'm doubting it. I'm pretty sure I'm a 3. I'm gonna say like an 87% sure on that. Because you have a bunch of different numbers that do a bunch of different stuff, and I know one of them is 3, and I'm pretty sure it's my life path, but I can't remember now.
Your life number is just, I think it's your birthday number reduced, and then you also have like the day of birth number. So like mine would be 8 because I was born May 8th.
Yeah.
So, and then the year
3
number and
those
all
the 12th.
Stuff.
Yeah. But so already I love the energy of 2022 based off of the number, but also just from everything we've touched on it a bunch on here, but just in general, like from everything I've channeled, everything I've looked at, I agree with you with the energy being, it still changes. It's just having a lot more agency again in navigating those changes, as opposed to all the changes happening to you. It's more of now you making the changes that are aligned with you, if that makes sense. Like that's how it looks and feels.
It's like riding the wave instead of hiding from the hurricane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very empowering and a lot more like, well, this is how it is, but I'm going to do this thing and that's going to be for me. And like, it's more of that kind of energetic exchange with a big emphasis on participating in the collective, though. I do want to put that out there. Like, that's going to be really big. Like everyone, it's almost like a reconnection. Like 2020 kind of fractured us apart on purpose in a lot of ways. It was really binding as well, but like that intense separation. 2021, everyone was dealing with the leftover genuine trauma and energy and all of that from the separation. And 2022 is like the putting together. What's that art? Oh, I wish I knew the word for it. In Japan, where a pot breaks and then you fix it with gold.
Oh, if you would have asked me like offhanded, I would have known, because I do love that art. But I can't remember now. But yeah, it's
anyway,
when you
we're
fill
in the fix it with gold
gold
stage.
Yeah, fix it with gold. I love it. It's like that one Disney short on Disney Plus with Olaf, where he's showing you Moana, and he just like throws a rock and calm down, Taka. I feel like that's going to be a big thing where we're all learning to calm down. But yeah, I really agree with you. 2020, I always said it's like Mother Nature sent us to our rooms and told us to think about what we'd done. And so in our rooms, we had us, and we had to come to terms with that. We had to realize who we were, what our relationship with the divine is, what our ideology is. What do we stand for when we don't have other people telling us how to believe, what to think, or just influencing us one way or another, right? And then 2021, it was like, okay, everybody else has changed too. So we need to get reacquainted. And that can be uncomfy when I thought I knew you and now you're a different person, but so am I. And like, how does that work? And so 2022, especially because Jupiter's come into Pisces, there is this expansion of collective energy, of unconscious energy, of like, we're all raindrops in the ocean kind of thing. And I really, really love that, where we've kind of expressed our individuality, we're coming to terms with it, we're setting our boundaries where they're important, and now we're respecting ours and those of others and learning how to cooperate in that. And I really do believe that life and interaction with others is about co-thriving. It's individuals thriving together. Nobody has to like compromise who they are or what's important to them. They work together, they help each other because they can and they're willing to. And I really
like that term.
Yeah.
I like that term a lot. Co-thriving.
Yeah.
I can get behind that.
Awesome.
Yeah. I also feel like there's a weird emphasis on like personal freedom, not in like the way the government propagates that kind of energy, but more in like a very high vibration, deep level of understanding your personal freedom of your own choices, of exploring what you want, like spiritual freedom, all those different things on a very not society level, but like on an intrinsic depth that I'm feeling very concretely, which is going to cause a lot of that like binding and co-thriving to happen because everyone's going to be owning their own stuff. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, if you remember the movie Avatar, they had the ICU, which means so much to me. Like one of these days, I'll have to tell you the story of when I met the Sekhmet statue in Egypt. The ICU finally became very important to me in that moment. But Egypt and woo-woo aside, what they meant was, I see you for who you are. It's very much like namaste. The light in me recognizes the light in you. And so we're able now to see past the mundane stuff about each other. The what's it called when it's just surface level stuff? I can't remember the word, but it's, just past the surface of each other and see that there are actual souls navigating the world next to us. And that is so incredible. And, a lot of people will come from different walks of ideology and backgrounds and nature and all these things. But if you see someone as a soul that is also here doing their thing, and they happen to be crossing paths with you, and you guys get to interact for however long, and then bless each other with knowledge, wisdom, experience of some sort, and then either stay together for a while or separate later. How cool is that? It just feels so transcendent, which is another really great word for Jupiter and Pisces too. Yeah,
I agree with that. Also on that note though, and I do just want to be clear about this, when I look at the energy of January and February, it's still fucking rough. It is rough. It's uncomfortable. It feels spiky and tense and kind of like we're all like so just, I know it's leading up to our the US's Pluto return, which is going to affect the planet as a whole. So I don't want to say this is just for us in the US, because unfortunately the US has been a driving force on the planet for the last 200 and however odd many years. So
I also want to acknowledge that we are aware that the United States is not the first entity to have a Pluto return.
Oh yeah, no.
Other governments, other nations, other kingdoms, or whatever have had them. Like they've been able to trace back and be like, oh, when the Pluto return would have happened for the Roman Empire, for, all of these other empires and things, they can track that. They can see what happened. It's just that this is
Repeatedly.
Yeah.
Because
this is the
America
United
is
States.
young.
That's exactly what I'm saying. This is the United States' first one. And because the United States kind of, in the March analogy, came in like a lion, it's sort of a thing that people are watching and wondering about. And when the United States does something, it tends to make the headlines. So it does affect everybody to a certain degree, but I also think it's really important that, we remain humble, which I think is a very great lesson that may come of this Pluto return, which I think is not a bad thing. Learning, like we were saying, that it's not all about one individual thriving, it's about co-thriving. I think even on a global level is going to be very long-term amazing, short-term interesting to watch maybe, but also just keeping that in mind, keeping in mind that this is the process of arriving at co-thriving. That's going to be really helpful to anybody who, you look at the news and it's just overwhelming and you're like, I have no place to actually make an impact on this, but I have to live in that world. And I know that that's a frustration a lot of us have. And considering that, just know that there are things in your scope, in your orb of influence that you do have control over, and that your actions will have a ripple effect, at least on your perspective in the world, on the people around you that you do affect, and eventually on a larger scale as you become that ripple in the pond that contributes to everything that happens. So it's important. Every action, every choice that you take, you do have that power. You do have that ability to make actionable, amazing change. So I hope that, as Pluto is something that indicates power in the zodiac, I hope that you don't find yourself getting lost in the feeling of being powerless, because you are not. And we will be here the entire time to help remind you of that in case it does get dicey and spiky. And it might, it's just going to be interesting to observe. And I really encourage people to take that stance of, I'm observing the unfolding of events in this spiral of history. And I consider it an upward spiral. To be clear.
And also, like, even when we've channeled in on it, it's more of a structure space of like a larger entity struggling, not the individual. Like, it doesn't feel so much on that level. A lot of on the individual level, it feels empowering. On like the larger country level, it feels like, whoa. So observing is a great place to be. Yep, for sure. And this is our last episode of the year before we usher in a new year. And astrologically, our calendar that we operate in, the like Julian calendar or whatever the fuck it's called, doesn't really have a lot of bearing on anything. So we just, it is almost like an arbitrary thing. But because we put so much collective energy into the new year, it truly does cause a lot of changes and a ripple effect in collective. It's very human pushed though. Like, it is very much a collective energy push, which I always want to acknowledge, because the astrological new year is Aries season. Yes.
Yes, when we get to the Aries equinox. And I want to respect and acknowledge the different hemispheres that end up really coming into play, especially around equinoxes and solstices. Yeah. Recently, we had what in the United States and in the Northern Hemisphere was the winter solstice. But I acknowledge that in the Southern Hemisphere, you guys are getting summer. And can I just say, I'm jealous. I do not thrive as much in the winter as I do in the summer. So I don't want to say the vernal equinox or the spring equinox, because it is the Aries equinox. And I will do my best to keep that terminology at the front of my mind so that everybody can feel like it applies more for them.
Yeah. And I agree with that as well, because I know we definitely talked about it like winter stuff, but we are where we are. So that's what we were doing. I did have someone ask a question on that, not on that episode, but like after that episode, like, what do we do if it's the summer equinox? We're in the Southern Hemisphere. It's like the opposite stuff, basically, like welcoming, where do you want to focus on going into the winter? Like, what kind of energy does that kind of are you bringing in? So it does still apply. It's just flipping it back and forth. So I agree. We will try to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I have the similar with just honoring what nature is doing around you and moving in flow with that, because that's where it's at. So
absolutely. So on that note, what all astrology stuff do we have coming up? And then also we can talk about what we want to, how we honor the New Year's ourselves, because I know sometimes people really need ideas for that as well. So
yeah. And I always love that too. So the cool thing that we're coming up on is the first transit of the year actually does happen on January 1st. And it is the sun trine Uranus. So Uranus is still in Taurus doing its thing. And the sun trining Uranus is still in Capricorn at this point. So this trine, I did my little transit skit. It's just the sun and a trine. Someone asked this recently, and I want to make sure I put it out there. We talk about squares as adding conflict or just adding a point where you can recognize an issue and then fix it. We talk about oppositions as creating tension or creating a line of sight, a bird's eye view from one thing to another where you can find balance. A trine is like a blessing or a talent or something that happens with such ease you almost miss it just because it flows so well. So it's like, imagine the trine is just letting water cascade down and it's just in flow. So the sun trine Uranus is shining light on change and allowing change to happen naturally. And it's one of those things where changes may happen, surprises may come up. Trines are generally positive aspect. So they bring what we think of more optimistic things. So it's just happy little surprises that happen to come up and things that just go really well. And like that worked. So that kind of stuff happens for January 1st. And I would give that like a day or so around there just to be like, wow, that was handy. That worked out really well. I wasn't expecting that, but I'm glad it happened. That kind of energy. It's a little bit happy-go-lucky, letting that new year, new me kind of energy really thrive. So I really like that for the way that we tend to focus and put energy into the new year and New Year's Day. I'm glad it's a trine because I will actually be driving that day. So unexpected, not so positive surprises would not be my favorite thing.
Great.
But this is positive surprises that you might be able to see that day. Also see where Capricorn and Taurus are in your chart, what houses they rule, to see how this might show up for you in your personal life. And then on the 2nd, we do have a new moon in Capricorn, the first new moon of the year happening on January 2nd. This is going to be at 1:34 p.m. Eastern time, and do feel free to adjust that to your time zone. And because it's in the afternoon, I would recommend checking, I think the moon does come into Capricorn the week or the night before. So new moon stuff would be great if you're someone who likes to do it at night. Doing it actually, if you think about astrological magic, the night of the 2nd, when the aspect is separating, is actually astrologically, magically, probably the best time to do it because the moon is no longer considered afflicted by the sun by applying aspect. So it's still got that like new moon visualization energy, but it's separating from the affliction of being conjunct with the sun.
So could you run down the timeline of that then, just like in order? So like on the 2nd,
So on the 2nd at 1:34 p.m. Eastern time, the sun and the moon will conjoin exactly. And then as soon as the moon separates from that, so by the evening, where you're at, especially if you're like West Coast or, after Eastern time, by the evening, the moon will have separated from that conjunction. So you can do all the things that you wanted to do as far as manifesting and things like that. I just like to, as a rule of thumb, not do applying. So before 1:34 p.m. Eastern time, maybe not. Check your chart. If the moon is still in front of the sun and moving towards the sun's number, then not the best time. The best time is after, and the moon moves pretty quickly. So give it like an hour, just push it ahead an hour or, that kind of thing. And you should come across a time that'll be a little bit better. Just if you're trying to align with the energy to that degree, it's helpful to keep in mind. And this is an interesting moon anyway. It's not exactly the best condition that the moon is in to begin with. The moon is actually considered in detriment in Capricorn. So I wouldn't be making any lunar talismans tonight by any means on this evening. But again, if we're just talking about general manifesting as compared to magic, then I would the little magical dose would be to do it after the exact conjunction. We do have a really cool situation where Jupiter is now officially in Pisces, which is so nice. But it is at the bend of the nodes. And what that means is you have the north node and the south node in a chart. Jupiter is right, like bisecting that line. So it's at 3:00 to their noon and 6, if you think about it that way.
Yep.
So it's really saying like, I can see both sides of this from a third perspective, from this objective perspective. And it's assessing anything that's happened before so that it can plan the next moves. So it's not exactly an action-oriented expansion. It's one that's like expanding awareness of what's come and what's ahead, which is so great for the beginning of the year, right? Taking stock of where you've been and where you're going seems to be a really great theme for this new moon in general. We also have Mars sextiling Saturn, which is a very opportunistic aspect. It's another positive one. It creates opportunity. You have to recognize it and take advantage of it. And because you're listening to this episode, now you know a way to take advantage of it is to look at the situations around you, see what isn't working, and say, okay, the next step, the very next step I can take to making things work out is this. And that way you're creating, maybe you don't have the foresight that you want right now, but you know what your next step is. And from there, you'll be able to figure out the next step, and just taking it one step at a time, but allowing yourself that motion is really helpful, because we are in a period where I think everybody can feel we're writing new rules for ourselves. So taking it one step at a time so that we can experiment as we go is helpful.
Yeah. I love all of that, especially the Jupiter bit, to be totally honest, because it's so much relief. And I hope our listeners also feel aligned with this, because even the second you said it, it's just like that relief feeling of like, oh, Jupiter's back where Jupiter is happy.
Yeah.
Like, it's so nice. Even if you haven't been consciously aware that Jupiter's been in places that it's not particularly happy.
Jupiter has seen some things, you guys.
Jupiter has been having the big feels for a while.
Oh yeah.
And now Jupiter gets to nap, which is just super nice. But I hope you guys had that similar, like, letting out, like in the classic YA fashion, letting out a breath you didn't know you were holding kind of feeling. That was how it felt when you even just said that. And I know that's what was happening, and it still felt that way. So okay, ready for it. Super ready for Jupiter to just calm down.
Yeah. And this is really a moment that sets into motion a lot of brilliant things. And I want to say that because the new moon is actually trining with Uranus on this day as well. Remember, just yesterday, the sun was trine Uranus. Now the moon's caught up. So they're both still in trine aspect within.
And what day is this?
This is on the 2nd of January.
Okay. Just making sure we're still on that day. I just want to
still on the 2nd. Yeah. So they're still trining Uranus, saying, hey, positive new systems and resources and, ways to make things work are on the way. And if you visualize them and you can feel what it's like to have them, you are 90% of the way there. And we even have Mercury, which is just getting into Aquarius that day as well. Yeah. In this, on the chart for the way I cast it for the location of the East Coast, generally, Mercury is actually at the top of the chart conjoining the midheaven. So it's brilliant minds at work, like forward thinking, getting stuff out there. And I love Mercury in the very Saturnian traditionally ruled, but also with a lot of Uranus agrees with a lot of Aquarian themes. It doesn't have official rulership in modern astrology. They'll put Uranus as the ruler of Aquarius. So I like to say Uranus really agrees with the Aquarian themes. So with Mercury coming into Aquarius, it agrees with those themes as well. Both those planets being ones of change, Mercury being even more personal change because it's a personal planet closer to us. It's really saying, hey, I have a brilliant idea. Let's go. And it's saying, let's go. But just know you're going to have plenty of time to get really good at this new idea because Mercury will be retrograding on the 14th.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Mercury retrograde, guys. Who's excited? It's okay. I'm not planning on traveling, so I'm pretty content.
Yep. Yeah, it's retrograding through my personal 3rd and 4th houses. So travel and home are both going to be getting some attention from Mercury and from me via Mercury's encouragement, which is how I like to look at it. So I really need to say this because I've already been getting a lot of people on TikTok commenting that they really wish they could thrive more through Mercury retrograde. That is all a matter of perspective.
It is.
If you, right? Like if you align, and I want to say, the 29th. So by the time this comes out, we will already be in Mercury's pre-shadow phase. From the 29th of December through January 14th, Mercury will be doing its first pass over the degrees that it will recover during retrograde. So just pay attention to what comes up between now and the 14th of January. Because those are the things that Mercury's already saying, hey, these are the things that can be great. And I want you to know that they can be great. And in a couple weeks, we're going to do the work to make them great. And we're going to take our time with it. We're going to make it awesome. And then February 3rd, we'll start laying the foundations and making sure they're cemented, and it will stay great. So that's how I like to think about it. Like Mercury is just a really speedy hype planet that's like, hey, you deserve the best. Let's make sure we get it right. And that's how I like to view retrogrades of all types, because we're still in Venus retrograde as well. So with our relationships and our valuables, we're also making sure that our priorities are in order, that we are getting what we deserve, that we're keeping our standards to where they belong and holding our boundaries where we need to, and those things. And by the way, when I say keeping our standards where they belong, I mean high. You don't need to lower your standards for anybody or anything.
Yeah, I agree with that completely too. And that's also the approach I try to take in retrogrades. Of course, big feelings tend to get in the way a lot of the time, especially if you are struggling with stuff. But what I will say, and Krista's seen this firsthand because she's seen me in my Mercury retrogradiest worst. Like genuinely, I've never had a worse retrograde than traveling for our first retreat. And Krista got to like see me every step of the way. Like, oh, I'm just gonna spend the night in Chicago without my luggage. It's fine. Like just all those different things. But the only way I can handle it so well is to be like, oh, what lesson is this? Or what did I need to get from this experience? And that way you can put it in an entirely new, higher vibrational light of, oh, well, I obviously just needed this night to regroup and have a bit of alone time and decompress. And that feels really nice. And I can get behind that. That feels amazing. So that when I wake up the next day, I know that I had this time to reset or whatever it was. Basically, I had every single flight and everything. This is like before the flights started going crazy in the country too. It just was all sorts of bad. But that is always how I try to approach it as well, especially in Mercury retrograde, especially when things like technology go wonky and the mail go wonky and travel and all those things, all those high stress things. Try your hardest to flip that over to, oh, why would this be happening for me right now? Because at the core of it, like Krista just said, Mercury is a personal planet. So it's happening for you on a personal level so that you can have different things come up and heal and fix and move bits around to help yourself be more successful at the core of it.
Yeah. And that's not to say that Mercury retrograde can't be useful. My husband is opening a second location of BAMC and they want to do it in January. And I was like, do you have to? Because typically for business things, you wouldn't want Mercury retrograde, right? But I'm pretty sure we opened original BAMC during a retrograde too. I wasn't as conscious of it at the time. But the cool thing about this is it's an experimental version of BAMC that's trying new things and seeing if it works. So with Mercury interacting with Aquarius and I believe also with Uranus at some point during its retrograde, I was like, okay, so you want this to be a trial and error situation, right? And they were like, yeah, that's the whole point. We need to be able to see. I was like, do it. This is perfect. This will give you all of the trial and error opportunities you are looking for to work out the kinks and come up with something that will sustain and work for when you're ready to actually launch it. So you can say, this is what Mercury does when it's retrograding. That's the effect I'm looking for. I'm going to do this at this time. I'm going to be working on revisions and edits in my story at that time because I want to find out what's wrong with my story and fix it. So it's very useful for certain times where you're like, where do I actually have the opportunity to slow down and take my time with something? Retrogrades. Yeah.
And we are still in Venus retrograde, which is something that's coming into play too. So January 2nd is kind of a big day energetically, but very high vibration energy, like a lot of really cool stuff happening, a lot of manifestation abilities, Jupiter doing fun stuff, trines, which are fun little bonuses. It's like you found the hidden block in Mario and you get like a special little bonus.
I love that. Or like you use the flute.
Yes, exactly. So just a little bit of like, ooh, yay, sliding through. But yeah, so big energy coming up that way. Is there anything that you do specifically or energetically to honor the new year each year? I have the most ridiculous New Year's tradition ever. So
So I like to on New Year's Eve, I like to do something I've never done before to wrap up the year.
Ooh.
And often I won't know what it is until that day. Like one year it was the cinnamon challenge. One year it was geocaching. I did it. I did it. It was awesome. I have a video of Dan not truly being able to complete the challenge, but he did try. So I don't know what we'll be doing this year, but we'll come up with something. There's always like last year, it was like, well, we've never done, a New Year's Eve at home alone before. So we did that.
That's
fun. We'll
fun.
come up with something new to do either on New Year's Eve or on New Year's Day, just to really remind ourselves that every day is an adventure and that we don't have to stay in the old routine or the same routine. I like to do card pulls. I try to honor the energetic and astrological New Year as well with that kind of thing, but just to let me know what's coming up and just to make sure that I'm in alignment. And because even as an intuitive, sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I totally get that. And then you totally miss something. So every once in a while, it's really good to get out of your own head and let something tell you rather than you try to interpret what you think you know.
Yeah. I've actually been doing a lot of card pulls lately for kind of that exact reason of this is my emotions are too much in this and I cannot clearly get an answer. So I'm just going to pull this card. It's going to tell me. And it does. It always does. And usually trust your gut on how many you want to pull and doing a spread and all of that. It doesn't always have to be super structured. It can just be like this one. And then this one feels like it needs another answer, and keep exploring from that space too, which I always want to give people that freedom, because I think a lot of people resist doing card stuff because they feel like they need to know the rules and need to have a spread and need to do all that, which nope, you don't. You can, it can be helpful, but you don't have to. That's really cool. I love that you do something new to end out the year. That is the coolest tradition.
Yeah. It's always fun just to try. It just, reminds you I think it makes life more of an adventure, which is what I'm always looking for. And the fact that, I'm with a partner who really supports that. The one year I was like, oh no, we didn't come up with anything. And he was like, I have a plan. Next thing I know, we're in a national park looking for a geocache location. And it's like, there it is. So it was really cool. And it's really cool. It's fun to come up with all these little new things that you've never done. Yeah. It doesn't have to be travel to Japan, although I recommend it. But it could be like the one time I was really sad. I wanted to go on an adventure, and it was right when powdered peanut butter became a thing. And I had never seen it, and I was fascinated by it, but I didn't say anything. I got really down on myself one night because I was feeling like life got too mundane. And Dan was like, we're going on an adventure. And he took me to Trader Joe's, and we were going to explore what powdered peanut butter was and then take it home and do all kinds of weird stuff that we could think of and look at recipes and just see what it did. And that's what we did. And it was an adventure. And so if you're looking for ideas, just explore something you haven't explored before, even if it's powdered peanut butter or geocaching.
That is so cute. Go Dan. Good,
he's the best.
Good job.
Yeah.
So for New Year's each year, and we've done this since I was a little kid. Weston tends to have to work nights. So Weston's my husband, and he works on New Year's because he works in a casino. And so it's an incredibly busy. It's like one of the busiest nights of the year. The population of Tahoe doubles on New Year's Eve. So it's one of those days where you don't want to leave your fucking house like at all if you can help it. That and the 4th of July. The 4th of July is literally like doomsday prepping. Like you go to the store a week in advance, you hunker in, you do not drive, and you just survive until everyone leaves. That is how the 4th of July is here on a very deep level. So it's a very home. They do fireworks on the lake, or they used to. They haven't the last 2 years because of COVID, but you can watch those from somewhere high up and not the beaches, because that's where all the tourists go. You don't go there. But New Year's is another one of those nights. Thank goodness they canceled. We used to have a music festival, it's like electronic musical festival called Snow Globe on New Year's in the middle of town. And we didn't have the infrastructure to support it. It was absolutely horrendous. And they finally canceled it. So this last year was the first year it didn't happen. It was really nice. But what we have always done for New Year's is my parents live about a half an hour away. So me and the kids would go to my parents' house. And I buy not like confetti poppers, but they're like tubes of confetti that have the long rectangles.
Yeah.
And there's no electronic anything to go with it, or like firepower. You just like shake it and all the confetti goes everywhere. So we've done this since I was a little kid, but inside the house before New Year's, usually around like 9 o'clock, we do a ton of them all over in the living room and then play with the confetti inside for as long as humanly possible. It gets everywhere. It's so fun. Everyone's laughing and cracking up. But the coolest part about it is even at like the next day when we clean it all up, for the rest of the year, you always find pieces of confetti stuck places. And it's like antidepressants, because the second you see it, all of that laughter energy and all of that fun energy that we like experienced on that New Year's, like playing with the confetti, just comes right back to you, and you immediately like laugh and you're like, oh, there's another piece of confetti. So we do that every year to make the new year full of joy as much as possible.
Oh, that's so cool. I love fun. That. I like that it lasts all year too. That's it does.
It lasts all year, and the confetti is biodegradable. Like, it's not bad for the planet. I always am like a stickler on that. So it's like very much a harmless way to just bring as much happiness as possible into the new year.
That's phenomenal.
Really fun.
I love that.
Yeah. And it's really, really fun to play with. Like, very much so. I enjoy it just as much as the kids do. So.
Well, and that's important. That's like Walt Disney's vision for Disney World was a place where the entire family could bond together, have fun at the same time. And so I really like that.
Yeah. So that's what our New Year's tradition is. And so that's like the best way I bring the energy in. I honestly don't do a ton of card pulls and stuff on New Year's Eve. I tend to focus the next week, that first week of January, on doing more of that stuff, of setting more intention, of putting more energy into the year, looking at the different, energies that I'm seeing coming up, doing card pulls, that kind of thing. This year on January 5th, I'm actually finishing my B set of tattoos. So I'm getting more tattoos, finally finishing my Bs. I'm getting a whole bunch of different Bs all over my body for those listeners. So that's a fun way. I'm like really excited to like start the new year doing something like that, because I always consider a tattoo a talisman. So it's pretty fun to like get more of those in my little collection. And so those are some of the energy ways I do it. So I highly recommend getting some confetti. It's great.
Confetti sounds like a really good time. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other big astrological things at play for this after the first, second of the year, leading up to our next episode, I guess?
Yeah. So hang on a second. Let me get my computer. It's funny. I've been having like a personal Mercury retrograde today. I have no specific aspects coming up today, but I have several tomorrow. And like today, I've already like accidentally thrown things across the room for no reason. Like I'll be replacing the water in my Keurig and it just slips out of my hand, but somehow launches halfway across the room, scaring the corgis and like all of these things. And it's happened about 3 or 4 times today already. So I'm just like, all right, we're being mindful today. I get it. So forgive me as I navigate my technological issues. I'm not sure what's up, but we do on the 3rd that Jupiter at the bend of the nodes will be exact. It's a pretty slow mover kind of thing. So it's not something to align with so much. It's just sort of saying, hey, societally, we're at this junction of where are we going? Where have we been? That's sort of, I like to consider this moment like an eye of the storm, where we know what we've been through, we get a deep breath, and then we get to finish what we started. And that's a really great way of choosing how to look at the next steps you plan to take, is finishing what has been started. And that's all it is. And then on the 5th, Venus will sextile Neptune. And again, a sextile aspect is an aspect that brings up opportunity. So Venus and Neptune, I really like, because it sort of feels like, Venus is of beauty and of art and all of those really lovely things. And Neptune can be confusing, right? But right now, Neptune is direct and it's in Pisces, and Neptune really agrees with the themes of Pisces, much like Uranus and Aquarius do. So you have this whole situation of this energy of really being able to visualize your dreams. And there may be some rose tinted lenses with them, but right now, why not picture warm and fuzzy things? Let yourself have that feeling and then see what comes up. I actually recommend in cases like this to feel warm and fuzzy and then see what visualizations or what feelings or what thoughts or what images come up when you feel warm and fuzzy, because that helps you identify what your definition of warm and fuzzy is. So rather than saying, oh, a soft robe is warm and fuzzy, but it might not be for you. It might be something else. So feel warm and fuzzy and then see what comes up that actually goes along with that feeling for your experience. And that is something that I think is really helpful.
Neat.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about it. So again, I'm talking about my tattoos again. I'm sorry, everyone. But my 3 Bs that I'm getting are the Jupiter B, the Mercury B, and the Venus B. So they're incorporating aspects of those planets, because those are very prominent in my chart, into these B tattoos. I'm getting it on the 5th, which is very interesting because Jupiter's finally comfortable and happy. And you just said that Mercury is starting to completely, what, I forget.
Mercury will be in Aquarius at that time.
Yeah. Venus is in retrograde though, which is very interesting. So
Venus is in retrograde. So if you're being introspective about art in your body, I mean,
that's intriguing.
Yeah.
Anyway, just a side note, I was like, it's always divine timing. I guess that's like the reason I bring it up on here, is genuinely everything you do has so much divine timing in it that even if you don't notice it right away, you will notice it after the fact. It is so powerful. Yeah. All of the choices we make are so divine. It's just a matter of us paying attention to get the validation we need from that.
Yeah, I see that all the time when I give astrology readings, because I'll look back on people's timelines with them and be like, at this point, did you notice that you changed this kind of stuff in your life? And they'll be like, oh my gosh, that's exactly when this happened. Even in my own timeline, the major events of my life match perfectly with, the techniques are zodiacal releasing, annual perfections, secondary progressions, all of those things work. And they show me different things that happened at those periods in my life. It just shows that, the chart really does express me. And I have lived my life in alignment, even if it didn't always feel easy, it's been aligned. And I really love offering that kind of feedback and assurance to people. And you'll notice, like, when you do something, it does seem to align with either transits or your personal timing. I just love it. It's awesome.
Or even just like, oh my gosh, that also came up because this was happening right now. And now I had this validation from the guide, and it needed to happen to make this happen. And it's just like this beautiful cycle, which I just love the energy of, especially when you see it and you can actually pay attention to it. So always pay attention to those kind of things, and even look back on things in your life. And if you can pull up your chart, it's really beneficial.
Yeah. Well, and everything, literally all of that, guides and our intentions and our thoughts and the energy and the aspects and all of those things, they are all connected. They all influence one another. It's a big chain reaction. So when you're looking at that, it's just so awesome to see how you always talk about how divinely supported we all are. And you can find evidence of it. And once you learn to see it, you can't unsee it. So it makes you more able to look at Mercury retrograde the way you do, where it's like, what am I learning here?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's not the universe against you. It's you collaborating and co-thriving with the timing of the universe and your personal timing, which is so cool.
Yeah. Oh, I love it so much. So this is also not just the last episode of the year, but also last episode of the month. So this is our bookend segment where we wanted to do a recap of all of the books we've read this month for you guys, whether they're high vibe or whether they're not high vibe, all of that jazz, which we like to do. But also we wanted to make it extra special and talk about one of our favorite high vibe reads of the year, since this is the last episode of the year. And I did just want to say too, I am going to start doing book reviews on our YouTube. So if you don't follow us there, check us out. But I'm going to do, every time I finish a book, I'm just going to post a video of whether or not the book was high vibe, what it helped me activate psychically, what it helped me maybe not activate psychically, or, what I got from it, that kind of thing. So they will be spoilery, but just so you guys know, if you want to watch those, not always spoilery, I guess, kind of minorly spoilerly, but if you want a high vibe take, I think I'm going to start doing those because I need to do something with all the books I read.
Yeah.
So, but what is your bookend? What have you read this month, Krista?
So I do want to set the disclaimer. Emily is much more prolific of a reader than I am. I end up reading a lot of nonfiction, like astrology books. So my fiction read this month has been A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I've had it for a while. I really wanted to get around to reading it. And I have to say, as far as high vibe, the craft of writing, masterful. The characters, awesome. The story, pretty good. High vibe, I wish I could say it was high vibe in the way that, like, I'm living in the story even when I'm not listening to it or when I'm not reading it, but it just didn't keep my imagination with it. It didn't stick with my imagination throughout the day. I think it's a really amazing, well-structured, well-executed, well-written story. There's not really a lot of flaws that I could point out as far as writing a story. It's amazing. But I wish the charisma, not the charisma, the chemistry between the main characters would have been more evident. And I do know the sequels are out there. I might listen to them, probably will eventually, but it would have been nicer to have that chemistry earlier on for how well fleshed out the characters are and for how neat they are. It would have been cool for them to really vibe more. And just to get that feeling from it. I haven't nailed down yet what the theme high vibe would be, like what energy we're learning, what belief we're transforming or anything like that. For anybody who's listening, those are my criteria of a high vibe story. Is there a belief that is being sort of transformed and challenged in the theme? Usually you see that in the, and the moral of the story is, and so I'm still deciding on that, but I'm in the climactic moment. So I'm sure that more will be revealed soon. And it's, like I said, totally entertaining, great read, recommend it if you love books. But high vibe, I would give it a 3 to 4 stars.
Yeah, I've read A Darker Shade of Magic too, and I didn't actually get to listening to the second one. Same reason, I think. It's good. It's just not, I wasn't lost in the world and I didn't completely love it. And it's good.
Yeah,
it's good. That's like the base level I got. I wanted
really
so much more out of it than I got,
but
which I think is what it is.
Yeah, like, it's super well developed, well thought out, all of those things. Like the skill is absolutely there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The energy is not, it wasn't activating. Is really my criteria for the high vibe too, is like, is there a belief that's being challenged, released, that kind of thing? More than one too. If there's more than one and they're all being challenged and released and all these different things, that's awesome. But also like how activating is it energetically? Like I usually check in with my energy at the start of a book, and then I check in with my energy at the end of the book, and I try to see how my energy's changed or if there's something been activated in it. And sometimes yes, which means the book is very high vibe, and sometimes nope, which means it's not.
I found moments where it kind of hit the spot of energy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, and then the moment would pass and it's like, oh, okay, but that's not even part of the main plot. So there may be a couple more hits of that energy, but it's not a thread. And I think, it's very close to high vibe, but I don't think it quite hits that mark. And again, if you're looking for a great read, definitely give it a shot. It's such a nice story. Amazing skill, all of those things, but the vibes aren't quite to the caliber or the level of being high vibe and shaking the energy and changing it up and making it warm and fuzzy. Not even warm and fuzzy, but just activating, I think is a great word for it.
Just activating, because as we always say, high vibe books do not have to be like all positive and sunshine and rainbows. Like dark stuff can still be very
sometimes
high vibe.
horror can be absolutely high vibe because it helps you process 100%. Emotions you usually hide from.
Things that make you cry can also be incredibly high vibe.
Giving you release to things that you don't usually acknowledge. Absolutely. I have a whole book where I write about this, just so you know, if you're interested. Writing the High Vibe Hero's Journey is the infrastructure for our program, the Forgotten Storytellers, which, by the way, we are open to pitches. So if you are someone who wants to write a high vibe story and you have an idea, but you want support, help, and the steps to get you there, and an amazing group of magical people, go ahead and pitch us at the Forgotten Storytellers at gmail.com. We would love to see a messy 2-sentence, 3-sentence pitch. Doesn't have to be perfect or polished. Go ahead and send it there. We are so excited to read that over. But Emily, what have you read this month? Because I'm sure your list is a bit longer.
It is a bit longer. Also, Forgotten Storytellers, guys, it's an amazing program. Your book will get done. Your first draft of your book will get done in 4 months. You get to do a high vibe writing retreat, all sorts of fun stuff. So please send us your pitches. It's our favorite part to read through them. We love it so much. But yes, so my number one outstanding best read of this month, and I read it in like a period of like 5 days, is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It is fucking incredible. I loved it with such a passion. It's one of my top 5 of the year for sure. Which is awesome. I snuck it in there in December. It's phenomenal. I cannot say enough about it. Talk about high vibe in a very conceptualized, like concrete way. The basic premise, just so that you guys know, because it's not actually a fantasy. Usually a lot of my stuff will be fantasy. This is not a fantasy. It is a historical fiction, kind of. Basically, it centers around the world, like one of the most famous actresses that ever lived in Hollywood, and she was married 7 times. and she wants to give her memoir to this journalist. So she actually tells her true life story for the first time to this journalist. Again, she's a fictional character, but it is so empowering. The amount of representation in it is awesome. It's wonderful. Tears, yes. One of those things that it was 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks ago, I finished it, and I still think about it every day. Wow. So yeah, it's a really good book. Read the book. It's a great book. So I read that. I'm still working on reading through Agrippina. So I am writing a book about a woman named Locusta, who was an ancient poisoner who lived in ancient Rome. And the best account of women's life basically at that period of time in which Locusta lived, and she actually interacted with Agrippina as well, is the account of Agrippina the Younger, who was essentially an empress. Kind of, she was married to multiple emperors and a sister of an emperor. It's all sorts of different stuff. So I've been working through that one to just kind of like really get immersed in the world and take notes. And that is actually like a biography of her life. So that's a nonfiction, but it's been really good. It's written really fun. It's a quick navigation. So if you're really into the Julian Claudian era of Rome and you'd like to read about some badass Roman women, Agrippina. I'm also currently reading Seven Deadly Shadows. Oh, also
lots of sevens.
I know, isn't that weird? Seven Deadly Shadows.
7 numerologically is like the number of going through trials and understanding things in process. So
yeah, makes sense. Also, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And The Seven Deadly Shadows, it has 2 authors. Let me look up who it is. Courtney Alameda and Vilaine E. Maitani, I believe. I hope I said that right. But it's like reading an anime. It's not, I've read a lot of manga. So I've read a lot of manga. My husband collects it, so we have a ton of it. It's not like reading manga because there's pictures. It is like, or reading light novels even. It is like reading anime. And that's the best way I can describe it. It takes place in Japan. And it's the Shinto priestess has to go meet a bunch of yokai and collect shinigami to help fight against the darkness, essentially. And so far it's really, really cool. There's some interesting elements to that I'm like, might not be as high vibe. So I'm kind of in between. Craft wise, it's pretty okay. It's not like the best book I've ever read in craft space, but so far I really enjoyed the fact of how I've researched a decent amount about Shinto, and it's so rooted in actual Shinto roots that I'm really about it. It's super cool. So if you're really into Japanese culture, if you're very intrigued by the Shinto religion or religious practices, and you want to learn about it in a way that's not necessarily academic, but is very research heavy, this is a great book to read. I would highly recommend it. Oh, and then I finished the 4th Throne of Glass book, Air of Fire, which is
nice.
Not high vibe, but it exists and it's fun to read.
I heard a lot about that series. I haven't gotten around to it yet. But...
Oh, the first 3 first 3 are fairly painful. It's fine. It's fine. It's a book that exists. I love the ACOTAR series, also not high vibe, just books that exist. Very good to capture your imagination and all that stuff too. Very not high vibe though, just going to continually mention that. Throne of Glass, same. I think I might end up liking Throne of Glass more overall, but there's a lot more to get into, but it feels so fleshed out. Less seat of your pants, more like this was a plan. It's fleshed out. So, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for best of the year, we may have the same one. Okay. Mine's Mistborn.
Oh my God, it's so good. So technically I only read the last book of the Mistborn series this year. So I only read that one, and it was in January. But it's so good.
I read all of them the original saga of Mistborn this year. I know there's continuations eventually. I do want to get around to them because that was the most recent series of books that I really got lost in. And was thinking about it even when I wasn't, it was meditative reading it. So the way it was written was good. The voice actors, for the audiobook was good, which incredible. Is such a make or break for me sometimes. If I have to sometimes look past the voice actor and be like, if I were reading this, I'd probably like it more, which I think is something that happened with The Darker Shade of Magic as well. But I think Mistborn just all around, because the vibe was there, the voice actor became aligned and like all of those things, and it was just amazing. So good.
It's so good. I have a tattoo from Mistborn. I loved it that much. So I completely agree. The voice actor too, guys. If you've read Mistborn, listen to it. It's so good. The way that he voice acts everyone is dead on.
Yeah.
Just dead on. Even the female character, like he hits the nail on the head. It's fantastic. So that would be mine, but again, I only read the last one. So I would say my other one is The House in the Cerulean Sea. And I did actually read it twice this year. Once I listened to it once and I loved it so much I read it to my kids. So it's so high vibe. It is so incredibly good. It's a standalone, and it's TJ Klune's one of my favorite authors who wrote House in the Cerulean Sea. And I cannot recommend it enough. Especially if you want, the book on it is literally described as being wrapped in a fuzzy gay blanket. That's what the description on the book is. So if you want that energy, read that book. It's about a magical orphanage, and it's about a magic guy who goes to audit a magical orphanage. And that's the premise, and it's really fantastic. So that's definitely one of my top awesome. Of the year. High vibeness. Yeah.
Cool. Well, awesome. Can you believe we are wrapping up 2021?
I'm not gonna lie, 2020 was a way better year for me than 2021 was.
Yeah, I think 2020 with our Scorpio moons, we were like, stuff's happening. There's things to respond to. And it just really, we are built for things like that. And for, holding space in that situation. And then now where it's been so external, I feel like I have stepped back and just have to have been like, okay, nobody's in a asking for my advice position right now. I'm going to have to wait. And then I get bored. So we start a podcast, which really helped.
It really did help. I've had a lot of, so 2020, a lot of really amazing things happened for me externally. Like I got married, my business took off. We started the Forgotten Storytellers, like all this stuff, just like really cool, big stuff. My book was officially published, just things.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. And then 2021 has been a lot of really intense external challenges that needed to get overcome. And I'm just tired, and I could just stop doing that for a little while. That would be fun. Like on a very personal level, external challenges, not necessarily negative, because I don't want to say it's negative. I'm just tired.
No, seriously, this year has been a lot for you. And to be fair, you came into your Saturn return this year as well. I finished mine. So I get to be like, oh, you're in your Saturn return. I've been there. No, seriously.
I'm almost done. I have like a month.
I had my crux of my Saturn return during 2020. So I get it.
Yeah, I'm so close to my Saturn return being over. I'm like ready for that too, but it's just been, it can be done. It can be done, especially this last month. It just royally kicked my ass, and now I tap.
Yeah, I remember that point too. But it's good. It's like hindsight's going to be so much nicer.
Yeah. And again, none of it was negative,
anybody, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you've gone through this year, the great thing that we have about New Year's Eve and the intentions about it is looking back and realizing how far you've come. Apply it to this new moon energy of that eye of the storm with where have I come from? What am I like? How have I grown? And how do I finish what I've come here to, to do? And that's just so empowering. You are a hero in your story, in someone else's life, all of those things. So yes, there are challenges, and no, they're not always fun to go through. And we're not here to say that you have to like grin and bear all of them, but it is something that you will survive through, and it will support you and make you able to thrive. And I hope that wherever you are in that process, you can at least believe in the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind, I think it's such an ancient, beautiful human thing to find ways to celebrate when we are transitioning from one era to the next. And it has happened for the history of humanity on this planet. And that's just what New Year's Eve is every year. So even though it's this modern version of, people go out and drink and kiss and whatever, but like, it's always been a celebration of transition. There's always one, and in every culture in this dark part of the year, like, let's celebrate something, let's transition through something and be proud of that. So be proud of that on this New Year's, because it's deep. thank you guys for listening. We really, really appreciate you. I believe the Spotify podcast rating stars situation has launched. So please, if you guys wouldn't mind, if you're listening to us on Spotify, rating our podcast, we would just really appreciate it. It's pretty magical that we get to have stars.
Yeah.
And
I think it's the same as like, if you want to tell your friends about it, this is telling people who may not know you that it's something you recommend. So if that's something that you feel inclined to do, we feel blessed. We appreciate you. And that's really cool.
Yeah. Also, if you want to see us talk again, you can find us on YouTube. It's the Alchemist Inkwell on YouTube. That's where we are. Krista does month-long astrology forecast, just focused on like the overall view of the month on that channel as well. And like I said, I'm going to do high vibe book reviews on that channel as well. So that's a great place to find us if you want to subscribe to us there. Other than that, we just really appreciate you. Thank you for listening, and happy new year, everybody.
Happiest of the new years. May it be a happy one. May it be happier than the last one and the happiest you've ever had so far.
Oh, that's good. I like that one. All right, everyone. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Go make some magic.
Hey, we got there in the end.
We made it.
Do as we
Bye,
say,
everybody.
not as we do.